Alright guys, hope you're doing well. My name is Lewis Moon and I am a mineral balancing practitioner, and in this video we're going to talk about the hidden copper toxicity indicators. So basically what I've done is I've tried to make the most extreme hair analysis test for hidden copper toxicity indicators that I can, and I'm going to talk about each one. So basically, in simple terms, copper is actually quite difficult to test for. Probably the only the most efficient way of doing it, but it's actually not very efficient at all, is by doing a liver biopsy. For obvious reasons, not everyone can do a liver biopsy. Blood tests are unreliable, urine tests are unreliable. So probably the most efficient and the most cost-effective way of figuring out copper toxicity is by looking at a properly performed hair mineral analysis test. Now you got to be super careful with this, because a lot of people say that hair analysis is the best way of looking for copper toxicity, and it is, but a lot of reports out there are not very good. They don't really understand copper toxicity. So if you've actually got a low level, like you can see on this test here, a lot of people assume that there's no copper toxicity involved. The copper level's low, therefore there's no hidden biounavailable copper. A lot of people read wrongly hair tests as replacement therapy, so they will see, oh, I've got a low copper, I must be low, when in reality that's not the right way of looking at it. Basically, what happens with copper toxicity, or a better way of talking about it, is biounavailable copper, is that for various reasons copper builds up in the body. In simple terms, whenever the body's stressed, it's lacking in minerals, it's lacking in things like zinc, the body will accumulate copper because of things like low ceruloplasmin, etc, etc. I'm not going to go into the details in this video because we're talking about the hidden copper toxicity indicators, but copper will build up in various organs like the liver, the kidneys and the brain. So actually, when you do a hair analysis test, we're taking obviously a sample of the hair. If copper's not accumulated in the hair in a biounavailable form, it might be more biounavailable in the liver, for example. It's not going to show up directly on the hair test. But the amazing thing about hair mineral analysis is, because there's 40 years worth of research, basically what people like Paul Eck had done and Dr. Lawrence Wilson is they've looked at hundreds of thousands of tests, and over time they'll see a pattern, and then on subsequent retests they'll see a copper dump. And by looking at that over and over and over and over again, you will see indicators whereby, if, for example, someone's in a calcium shell, it's extremely likely that in the future, if they keep doing the mineral balancing program, they'll get a copper dump. So that's what we call hidden copper toxicity indicators. Now, there is actually quite a few indicators. I've actually written them all down on here. And I've tried to make a hair analysis test that will give us the most copper indicators. Now, for some of them, so on this particular test, it is showing 15. So that's kind of like the max it can show, really. The reason why we can't get sort of higher than 15 is because one copper toxicity indicator is a low zinc, another copper toxicity indicator is a high zinc. So obviously you can't get both of them at the same time. It's impossible. Another one is like a calcium shell, for example. So you could, if you're a male, the calcium shell is cutoff is 155 milligrams percent on a hair test, whereas for a female it's 165. So again, 15 is sort of the cut-off point. I personally believe there's other copper toxicity indicators. For example, a really low sodium magnesium level is probably one of them. But yeah, we can improve on that as we improve upon the program and improve upon the hair analysis tests. So I'm going to talk about each one and talk about the reasons why it's related to hidden copper toxicity. Alright, so the first one is slow oxidation. So slow oxidation is basically when the calcium magnesium levels are higher than the sodium and potassium levels. That's basically what slow oxidation is. So as we can see, calcium magnesium is higher than sodium and potassium. This is indicative of someone who's got a sluggish metabolism. They feel depressed. They can feel very numb to the world. The ideal level, actually, and this is quite confusing, the ideal oxidation rate really is sort of like a mild slow. So if the sodium potassium levels were a bit higher, just below ideal, and the calcium magnesium was lower, just above ideal, this would be a mild slow. This would actually be a pretty good oxidation rate, considering the rest of the program is looking good. So some people can have like a pretty good oxidation rate, but they're showing a lot of like poor eliminators. They might be showing toxicity in various things. They might have a low zinc. So looking at the hair test as a whole, we would assume that the individual is struggling, even though their oxidation rate is looking pretty good. And usually on subsequent hair tests, we will probably see changes in that oxidation rate, where a person might go into a 4-low pattern, which is kind of like a sub-oxidation rate, or they might go into sort of a default slow oxidation. So we've got a slow oxidation rate. The reason why this is a hidden copper toxicity indicator is because, if the oxidation rate is super slow, then an individual is quite sick, they're not functioning correctly. And the way to look at hidden copper is whenever the body's not functioning correctly, whenever the detox pathways are low, whenever people have got signs of high heavy metal toxicity, whenever people have got signs of weak adrenal glands. Weak adrenal glands is probably the biggest one, because basically what happens is the adrenal glands has to be functioning properly in order for it to send signals to the liver to create copper binding proteins like ceruloplasmin. So when the adrenal glands are weak, you don't really get adequate levels of ceruloplasmin and other copper binding proteins, and therefore the body can't move copper around the body properly, and as a result it sort of accumulates. A lot of people mistakenly think that they've got copper toxicity because they've been taking in too much copper. It's not necessarily the case at all. Usually the culprit is low ceruloplasmin, low copper binding proteins that bind to copper and make it available around the body. And the biggest culprit is sort of weak adrenals. So most of these hidden copper toxicity indicators are actually indicators of sort of weak adrenals. And that's personally why I think probably a really low sodium magnesium level is also another indicator, because that is a sign of weak adrenal glands. So we've got slow oxidation, we've got a high calcium level, so above 70. So there's two indicators here. There's a high calcium level above 70 and a calcium shell, which is basically above 155 if you're a male, 165 if you're a female. Again, it's all related to sort of weak adrenal glands. Trauma is definitely related to a elevated calcium level. All right, moving on. So we've got a high magnesium level. High magnesium is similar to calcium, similar to a calcium shell. So again, the body is sort of, in a bit of a traumatized state. So we've got low potassium. So a potassium level of 4 or below is actually an indicator of someone who's in the chronic fight or flight. We call it sympathetic dominance. Again, when you're in a state of chronic fight or flight, although the adrenal glands is putting out some form of response to the stress, i.e. chronic fight or flight, it's extremely tired and fatigued underneath. Usually people in chronic fight or flight is running on sort of false energy. So actually when we do some things to actually get a person out of sympathetic dominance, they might actually feel more fatigued because it's actually uncovering their true adrenal exhaustion. So we've got low potassium level is another indicator of hidden copper toxicity. We've got a low zinc level. So zinc and copper sort of work together. They're a little bit like yin and yang. Most people have got zinc deficiency issues or low zinc issues. It's a little bit challenging on a hair test to fully understand zinc. The body does quite a good job at trying to keep zinc in at a good level, especially in the hair. So if you have generally got a low zinc on a hair test, you are definitely deficient in copper, and we do have zinc deficiency indicators on the hair test. So we've got quite a few here. All of these blue ticks are zinc deficiency indicators. So also counterintuitively, an elevated zinc is also a copper toxicity indicator. Why is this? So if you've got an elevated zinc, let's say it's up here at sort of 20 milligrams percent, that's actually indicative of someone who's burning out of zinc. The body's using up too much zinc. That's what it represents on a hair test. So again, because copper and zinc work together, so they're like twins really, or brother and sister. So if you've got low zinc in the body, you've generally got high copper within the body, or copper toxicity. So if you've got an elevated zinc, that is actually an indicator that the body's burning up too much zinc, and therefore there's a deficiency of zinc, which is which is a sign of hidden copper toxicity. All right, high mercury. So the mercury level is high. Mercury, usually if you've got sort of a lot of heavy metal toxicity, you're also going to have copper toxicity. It sort of works hand in hand. A lot of the reason is damaged detox pathways, damaged liver. You always get an increase of heavy metal toxicity. It's basically unheard of to just have copper toxicity and not other metal toxicity. So if you are showing elevated metals, the chances of you having some sort of copper toxicity is extremely high. But mercury is a very, very common culprit. So if you've got high mercury level, the chances of you having a high bioavailable copper level is pretty much guaranteed. So another indicator is slow oxidation with a copper less than... I don't think that's correct. I think it's 1.5. So slow oxidation with a copper less than 1.5. So if a copper level is below 1.5, this is an indicator of copper toxicity coupled with a slow oxidation rate. The reason being is that we call this poor eliminators. Poor eliminators are actually discussed down at the bottom here. So basically what they found over the years is that if a metal or a mineral is extremely low, that's actually a sign that the body is struggling to actually remove them toxic minerals or toxic metals. Again, counterintuitive, because a lot of people just think, oh, I've got a really low mercury level, or I've got a really low arsenic level, I must not have any of these toxins inside the body. That could be true if a person's not got any symptoms, and the hair analysis test looks pretty good, and the heavy metals are low, then yeah, there's a high chance that you actually do have pretty low levels of metals. But you never really get people do hair analysis tests that have not got any symptoms for a start. And when people do have symptoms, because hair analysis is so accurate, 95% of the time you're gonna receive a hair test which is basically telling you this person's suffering, and again 95% of the time you can match up very clearly a person's symptoms with the hair analysis patterns that are actually presenting themselves on a hair test. Very, very rarely you'll get a hair test that actually looks pretty good on an initial test. If this is the case and the client's got plenty of symptoms, you will say to them, look, your hair test's looking pretty good, but this is one of the reasons is toxic metals tend to prop up minerals artificially, temporarily. When a person actually starts a mineral balancing program and gets a retest, that's when you will see the true hair analysis pattern, if that makes sense. So you can still rely on the hair analysis test, because if a person's got symptoms and the hair analysis test looks pretty good, then you can very, very confidently say to the individual, look, do the mineral balancing program. Let's see what the retest looks on the next test. If the person's doing the mineral balancing program well, you'll get the retest, and guaranteed you will see a much different hair analysis pattern. You'll see the true levels of an individual. So you can still rely on a hair analysis test if things are quote unquote looking pretty good, if an individual gets a retest. So the next one is a calcium potassium ratio greater than 10. The calcium potassium ratio is this one. It's indicative of thyroid effect. So the thyroid gland hormones on the cells. So here we are. Elevated calcium potassium ratio is an indicator of reduced thyroid effect. Basically, the adrenal glands and the thyroid gland work together. They're like a team. So if you've got weak adrenal glands, you're also going to have weak thyroid glands. Now, it's important to realise the calcium potassium ratio is not directly the output of the thyroid gland. It's more to do with how much thyroid hormone is actually getting inside of the cell, if that makes sense. But it's pretty much closely related to the thyroid as well. So you can get a good idea if the thyroid hormones are not getting into the cells correctly, the chances of having a low thyroid output is actually pretty high. Alright, so the next one is calcium potassium less than 2.5. So the NAK ratio is like, we call it sort of like the life or death ratio. It's such an important ratio to keep in balance. If you have got a low NAK ratio, you're not going to be feeling good at all. People usually feel depressed, sluggish, stuck in the past is a big one. So anyone with a low NAK ratio, their health is not going to be very good, especially if it's super low. Some people have a fairly balanced NAK ratio, so like an NAK ratio, the ideal level is 2.5. If you've got an NAK ratio of like 2.4, it's not too bad. This particular test has a very low NAK ratio. The exact level is, let's see, 0.25. So that's pretty extreme, but I'm just showing you this as an example of a hair test that is, very, very bad copper toxicity indicators. Alright, so phosphorus level less than 13. So the phosphorus level is like the vitality ratio. If you've got a very low phosphorus level, it's an indicative of someone who's struggling with protein synthesis. So again, the body is just struggling. It's under stress. It's not functioning properly. It's not got a very high vitality. Another indicator that the adrenal glands are under a lot of stress. The detox pathways are shut down. The body's not digesting things properly. All indicators of hidden copper toxicity. Alright, a 4 lows pattern. So this test doesn't show a 4 low pattern. A 4 low pattern is sort of like a pattern whereby, when the body's been under considerable amount of stress for a long period of time, the body will basically collapse into a 4 low pattern. So a 4 low pattern is when the levels are all below ideal. So 40, 60, 25 and 10. It's tricky to look to see a 4 low pattern on a trace elements test. I would highly recommend running it through our application at hairanalysis.report or getting an ARL test. But there are benefits to a trace elements test. They do actually test for more minerals, so it's swings and roundabouts. The absolute best thing to do, in my opinion, is to get, if you want more minerals on the test, is to get a trace elements report and run it through our system so you can see the patterns pretty nicely. Alright, so 4 highs pattern. So 4 highs pattern is when all of the minerals are above ideal, all 4 of them. This is like an alarm response reaction, sort of like a secondary alarm response reaction. It's not too common, I've personally found. Most people are in sort of like a 3 low pattern, a 4 low pattern, or a calcium shell. But anyone that's in the 4 highs pattern is in a stress response, and as a result, again linked to the adrenal glands, it's a sign of hidden copper toxicity. So next one, slow oxidation with an NAK greater than 4. So the ideal NAK is 2.5. So this is someone with a quite a high NAK ratio. That's another indicator. Calcium shell in males and females, we've talked about that. Slow oxidation with a copper less than 1. So this is similar to this one above here, but this is a more extreme version. If you've got a copper level less than 1, you've got a really poor eliminator of copper. So again, it's an indicator to us that the body's storing copper and accumulating it. An NAK less than 2.5. So we've also got other patterns in here with an NAK ratio less than 2.5, but it's also coupled with other things like a slow oxidation. We talked about that one. So a step down pattern, which is not shown on here. A step down pattern is basically when the hair test looks like a stairs going from left to right. So in order to see a step down pattern on this test, we'd have to see the sodium level at like 25, for example, and you would see a diagonal pattern coming from left to right downwards. This is a sign of an individual who's struggling, who's under stress, but they're actually moving forwards in a positive direction. But even though it's like a joy pattern actually, because a person is moving forwards slowly but surely. However, they are, it is a sign that a person is under stress, if that makes sense. The body is sort of sick and struggling. So again, another copper toxicity indicator. Sorry about the length of this video, there's a lot of indicators. So double low ratio, this again is not a double low ratio. So double low ratio is like a sawtooth pattern on the first 4 minerals. Again, indicator that the indication that the body is under stress. A bowl pattern. So this pattern is technically a bowl pattern, but it's difficult to see. A bowl pattern is when the test looks like a bowl, if that makes sense. So the potassium level is elevated, the sodium is lower than the potassium, and then the magnesium is lower than the calcium. So a bowl pattern is basically when someone feels stuck. They feel like they've got nowhere to turn. They don't feel like they've got many options in life. And again, it's an indicator that the individual is struggling in terms of energy, is struggling in terms of, usually people in a bowl pattern have got some mineral deficiencies. So again, another indicator of copper toxicity. So passive aggressive pattern, which is a calcium shell with a 4 or 3 highs. So again, this is not shown on this test, but a calcium shell. A 3 highs is when 3 of the first 4 minerals are above ideal. A 4 highs is when all of them are above ideal. Wasting one's time, so calcium level greater than 155, and a calcium magnesium level greater than 13.5, which is a lifestyle stress pattern, and a potassium level less than 5. And then stress from within and without, calcium magnesium is greater than 13.5 and potassium less than 5. Basically, this is a lifestyle stress. Lifestyle stress is really interesting actually, because basically the calcium magnesium level is a really good indicator of blood sugar regulation. So if it's above 6.65, it's actually a really good indicator that the individual is probably overeating on carbohydrates and sugars, especially if it sort of gets above 8, 9, 10. When it actually gets above 13.5, it kind of switches, and it switches to a lifestyle stress pattern. So it's an indicator that the person's external life is actually causing them a lot of stress. So this particular test, we've got a lifestyle stress pattern, an extreme lifestyle stress pattern, and a wasting one's time pattern. So that's basically it. You know, these are copper toxicity indicators. Is it absolute proof that the individual is suffering from copper toxicity? No, it's not. However, the only way to get absolute proof is to do something like a liver biopsy test, which is impossible. Sometimes copper is stored in the brain by unavailable, or in the kidneys. Obviously, you can't do a biopsy of the brain. That would be pretty dangerous. So what we've got to do is we've got to look at the hair tests over a 40-year period, hundreds of thousands of hair tests, and look time and time and time and time again, right, we see these patterns, the ones that we've just listed, and we've noticed that it's a high likelihood if someone follows a mineral balancing program that they will experience a copper dump. And when you go through that hundreds and thousands of times, you basically get these hidden copper toxicity indicators. Now, you know, if someone's showing like maybe one indicator or two indicator, you know, it's much more difficult to completely pin it down that they're suffering from hidden copper toxicity. That's when you got to look at symptoms and stuff. So if individuals say, right, I'm suffering from insomnia, racing mind, skin rashes, you know, PMS issues, and they've maybe got like one copper toxicity indicator, then, you know, you can basically guarantee that they're suffering from copper toxicity issues. If they've got like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 copper toxicity indicators, you don't even need to look at the symptoms, from my experience, to pin down that they are suffering from copper toxicity. Alright, so that's everything. If you do want to work with me and begin a mineral balancing program, just email me, lewis@lifelabshtma.com, or visit htmapro.com/LewisMoon to begin. If you are a practitioner and you do want to analyse tests like these reports, then just visit hairanalysis.report, and yeah, you can sign up as a practitioner there. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and speak to you soon.